Welcome to the Heavy Blend. We're here to give you the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed about the worlds of rock and heavy metal. We take a whole stack of specialist press reviews, synthesize the key insights, and, well, we deliver them straight to you. We're an independent project, born in Italy, and our whole mission is to offer you an in-depth, unbiased overview of an album. We do use the most recent AI tools to help structure and elaborate information, but let me be really clear. The entire critical activity, choosing the sources, crafting the prompts, right down to the social media and the video editing, it's all performed by people. People with authentic passion and, I'd say, pretty deep experience in the music sector.
And that human touch is so important. It's why we don't just cover the historically important albums. We also actively want to promote emerging bands.
Right.
As long as there's a good number of authoritative reviews out there for their work, we are ready to dive in.
And today, we are diving into a really exciting emerging force, the Portuguese symphonic metal band, Glasya. We're focusing on the third full-length album, Fear. We've pulled together a fantastic stack of sources for you today, including Jornal Metal, Metalhead, Metalitalia, Metalis, Metal Shock, and True Metal.
So our mission is to synthesize all these different perspectives for you. Glasya is a band that's growing fast, and the critics are really debating the stakes of this record. Is Fear the album that solidifies their identity? Or does it, fall back into the standard, maybe sometimes repeated formulas of the symphonic genre? Let's unpack what they said.
Okay, let's start with the basics. Glasya is a Lusitanian, that's Portuguese symphonic metal band, and they're fronted by the truly notable vocalist Eduardo Soro. And we should probably mention she also performs live with the titans of Portuguese metal, Moonspell.
Before Fear, the band released Heaven's Demise in 2019 and then a Targan in 2022. And Metalhead reminds us that a Targan was a very specific kind of concept album. It was all focused on Persian antiquity, which let them incorporate some more exotic sounds into their metal base.
But with Fear, wow, they've done a complete 180. They've moved from these historical epics to a really deep, intense psychological concept. Reviewers across the board describe this album as like a cinematic score. True Metal and Metalis both really emphasize this visual immersive approach.
And the concept itself it's ambitious. Metalitalia and Metal Shock it tells the story of a woman in a coma after a car accident.
Yeah.
So she's trapped in this dreamlike inner projection of her own mind where she has to confront and ultimately overcome her deepest fears.
Wow, that immediately sets a really high bar for the atmosphere, right? Metalis noted that the band was drawing inspiration from cinematic composers, and they specifically named Hans Zimmer.
And True Metal painted this really evocative picture. They said the dark thriller horror atmosphere was like a thriller set in 19th century decadent Venice. It's high stakes, high drama storytelling.
And to pull off that kind of cinematic scope, you need absolutely pristine audio quality.
Exactly. Metal Shock was quick to highlight the strong production by Fernando Matias and the mastering by the Jaime Gomez Arellano, and that's the guy who's worked with Ghost and Behemoth.
Oh, wow.
So Metalhead was very clear. The result is this robust, modern, and detailed sound that is just exponentially superior to their past work.
Wow.
You simply can't stage a convincing, dark, operatic thriller if the sound is anything less than perfect.
Okay, so the foundation is rock solid. Let's turn to the heart of the album then, the vocal performance and the band's stylistic evolution. Metalitalia noted that while that essential symphonic stamp is still there, the sound actively pulls away from what Jornal Metal called the happy metal that you so often find in the genre.
And that shift is driven almost entirely by the growth of Eduardo Soro. Metalitalia pointed out that she is finally shaking off the stylistic ghost of Tarja Turunen. She's moving away from just imitating the operatic style of the ex-Nightwish vocalist that, characterized some of their earlier songs.
Instead, she's showing off a far greater and, frankly, more mature versatility. Metalis observes she now shifts effortlessly between a pure operatic voice and more melodic, modern styles. Metalitalia even drew a parallel to the nuanced delivery of After Forever.
Well, and what's truly fascinating is the consensus on her absolute standing in the genre now. True Metal rates her voice as absolutely high level. They assert she stands shoulder to shoulder with established figures, the sacred monsters, as they put it, like Tarja Nadal or Melissa Bonney. I mean, that is top-tier praise.
It really is. And that praise confirms she's so much more than the pretty presence that, as Metalis observes, sometimes holds back similar projects. Her character and vocal range just elevate the music. Her voice isn't just the lead instrument, it's a truly integral orchestral element.
And that maturity, it extends to the rest of the band's dynamic. Metalhead noted a really significant improvement in the use of dual vocals. The interplay between the female and male voices, which they previously called school-like, meaning, academic and uninspired, is now much more effective. It provides a dynamic contrast that really contributes to the story.
And here's where the strategic brilliance of the album really comes into play. The use of guest artists. Janelle and Metal noted that these collaborations are vital. They contribute so much to the album's heterogeneity and overall mood, allowing these high-profile guests to inject their own unique flavor without overwhelming Glasya's core sound.
And the roster is seriously impressive. You have Fernando Ribeiro of Moonspell on the title track Fear and In Debris. Metal Shock says he adds that signature dark narrative gravitas that, only he can deliver. It fits the thriller atmosphere perfectly.
Then you have Michel Guattoli, who's everywhere, right? Vision of Atlantis, Temperance, he's featured on Glimpse of Memory. Metal Shock called it a potent and powerful duet. But Journal Metal had this really surprising take, noting that Guattoli's presence introduced these subtle pirate elements into the track. It just proves even a small collaboration can add unexpected texture.
And we also hear Scarlet from Dark Oath, who brings an almost blackened force to the track Rising Wildfire, according to Metal Shock. And to push the boundaries even further, the inclusion of the tenor Felipe de Moura in Rescue, well, it pulls the album right up to the boundary between metal and lyrical theater. That breadth of collaboration, it just speaks volumes about their vision.
That focus on immediate impact is also really clear in the singles they chose. Metalitalia points out that the title track Fear and then Hunt of the Hunted were both chosen as singles. They're described as potent, catchy, and just instantly impactful. These tracks provide the heavy, accessible foundation for the whole story.
But before we move on to any criticism, we have to talk about the closing track, No Teu Abrigo. It's the Portuguese version of In Your Haven. Metal Shock highlighted this track, sung entirely in the band's native language as this brave declaration of cultural identity, an emotional return home after all the chaos of the dream world. It was noted specifically for its sincerity.
And Metalitalia confirms its dramatic effectiveness, describing it as this tranquil, slow song that steadily builds intense sonic strength through the powerful drumming of Bruno Ramos. It creates this masterful, cathartic crescendo. It sounds like the perfect release after that journey. Now, we just want to pause here and sincerely thank all of you for the positive feedback that the Heavy Blend is getting from the public, from the specialist press, and even from the bands themselves. Your engagement really makes these deep dives possible.
Thank you. But as strong as the reception for this album is, the critics did stop short of giving it perfect scores. And this is where we have to look at the album's central conflict. While the production is untouchable and Devon Van Dave's keyboard work is praised for being perfectly calibrated, the overall structure, well, it sometimes falters.
Right. The primary weakness, which was identified by both Metalitalia and Metal Shock, it stems directly from the album's biggest strength, the narrative concept. They criticize the over-reliance on spoken or recited passages, the spoken word bits at the start of songs used to explain the plot.
Yeah, Metalitalia specifically said that these voices were criticized for being purely didactic. They lacked emotional impact, and ultimately they detracted from the musical immersion. So it seems that soundtrack metal ambition, while really compelling, it occasionally prioritized narrative clarity over pure musical flow, which can slow the whole thing down.
And speaking of pace, let's address the most common musical critique, the guitar work. Metalhead and Metalitalia both point out that the guitar pairing of Hugo Esteves and Bruno Pritzes could be significantly more daring. The critics suggest the guitars could stop continually tending to rhythm.
And to explain that for you, it means the rhythm guitarists are, well, they're playing it safe, they're sticking to a supportive role, backing up the keys and vocals, but they aren't stepping out with memorable leads or complex solos or heavy, unexpected riffs. They're sticking too closely to the conventional formulas of the genre, and Metalitalia argues this leads to some less memorable songs overall.
So this raises a really crucial question about the whole concept then. Is the dedication to the narrative worth the occasional structural slowdown?
Well, Metalhead suggests that the ambitious commitment to telling the story, while compelling, does lead to some overly drawn-out sections, which can sometimes interrupt the momentum of the musical flow.
That's fascinating.
But what's really interesting here is the final, mature synthesis from Metallis. Despite these structural flaws, they conclude that Glasya succeeds by subtraction, meaning they don't try to reinvent the wheel, but they perfectly balance existing elements. They avoid being less intense than Nightwish or less catchy than Beyond the Black.
So they offer an adult, multifaceted, and long-lasting album that showcases just tangible growth and maturation. They've really defined their identity by skillfully balancing existing symphonic elements, but according to this refreshingly original dark vision.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think we can conclude this debate clearly and decisively. The overall press reaction is unanimous. Fear is a definite step forward. It's a highly refined, mature, and technically impeccable symphonic work that benefits immensely from a masterful production team and powerful, strategically used guest collaborations.
The consensus scores are consistently high, generally landing around a 7 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10 across the board. Journal Metal and Metalitalia gave it a 7, and Metalhead and True Metal awarded it an 8 or an 80 out of 100. The band has absolutely hit their target. This is an ambitious concept album that succeeds in being emotionally involving and extremely well-balanced. Metal Shock just flat out calls it a true opera.
And that leads to the final provocative thought, which ties right back to the album's central theme. Metal Shock suggested that fear won't miraculously help you overcome your fears, but it will make you understand that confronting them is the only way to truly emerge. And that depth is what makes this album so highly recommendable to fans of the genre and beyond.
We really hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Glasya's fear. And remember, if you're watching the video that accompanies this, there is a QR code available. Scan it to visit the band's Facebook page directly. For the team behind the Heavy Blend, connecting you, the audience, directly with the artists is the most important thing we do.
And we invite you to interact with us. Leave a comment below the video with your thoughts, and maybe answer a few questions for us.
First, which specific moment or track on Fear, especially one featuring a guest vocalist, stands out to you the most?
Second, do you prefer Glasya's current cinematic, dark approach? Or did you prefer the more exotic, historical style of their previous album, Atargam?
And finally, which emerging band do you think the Heavy Blend should dive into next? Let us know what the specialist press is saying about them.
And please, share our content if you found it interesting. We truly believe that sharing a passion among people is much more important to us than the number of subscribers to the podcast or the YouTube channel.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time on The Heavy Blend.
I wasn't lying, I wasn't sure.